What does it mean to live a life of true freedom? Is it to bow before an eternal ideal of goodness, or to forge a path through the chaos of our own making? Welcome to True Freedom, where we unravel the threads of human existence through the lens of philosophy. Today, we stand at the crossroads of two towering minds: Plato, the architect of absolute virtue, and Friedrich Nietzsche, the herald of unbridled will. In this intellectual arena, their ideas clash in a timeless debate about morality, values, and the essence of humanity. Imagine a world where justice reigns as an unshakable truth, or one where every soul crafts its own destiny. Which vision stirs your spirit? Dear at True Freedom, we've summoned these giants from the annals of thought to wrestle with questions that echo through the ages. Plato, the disciple of Socrates and mentor to Aristotle, built the foundations of Western philosophy with his belief in a supreme, unchanging good. Across the divide stands Nietzsche, the provocateur who proclaimed the death of Baden champion the rise of the superhuman spirit. Their words, sharp as swords, cut through the haze of modern life, challenging us to reflect on what binds us or sets us free. This is no mere academic exercise. It's a journey into the soul of existence. As you join us, consider, does freedom lie in order or in rebellion? Subscribe to True Freedom, hit the bell, and share your thoughts below. Tell us which philosophical titans you'd like to see clash next. Let's dive into this battle of ideas, where the stakes are nothing less than the meaning of our lives. The stage is set, the air thick with anticipation. Two voices, separated by centuries yet bound by their relentless pursuit of truth, step into the fray. Plato, robed in the calm certainty of reason, speaks first. Greetings, friends of truth, he begins, his tone steady as the marble of his academy. If morality lacks a solid, eternal foundation, it is but a fleeting illusion. Justice, virtue, and the good do not bend to human whim. They exist in themselves, immutable and absolute. The philosopher's duty is to unveil these realities and guide us toward them. Words carry the weight of a man who sees beyond the shadows, a visionary who sculpted the Republic to illuminate the soul's ascent to the idea of the good. For Plato, this supreme form is the sun that lights all else, a beacon of order in a universe that craves harmony. Across the divide, Nietzsche's voice cuts through like a hammer striking stone. "Hello, my good friend," he says, a wry smile curling his lips. "Once again, you chant the tired hymn of eternal truths and supreme goods. Plato, you cling to fairy tales. Man himself has given being to all things. I wrote that morality is no mirror of an ideal realm, but a two-love domination, a pious lie that has shackled humanity for centuries." His eyes burn with the fire of a prophet who has seen God's tomb and danced upon it. Nietzsche, the critic of Christian meekness, rejects the notion of a higher order. To him, the true world Plato exalts is a fable, a cage built to tame the wild spirit of life. Plato's rebuttal is swift, his logic sharp as a blade. A to love domination, you say? What an impoverished view of morality. Justice, the good, virtue, these are not human inventions, Nietzsche. They are eternal realities. In my Republic, I argue that the good is the supreme idea, illuminating all existence. Will you deny there is order in the cosmos, a natural hierarchy the soul must follow to grasp truth? His vision is one of structuracity, where philosophers reign as kings, not out of tyranny, but to align the human spirit with the divine. To Plato, the universe is not chaos, but a tapestry woven with purpose, and morality is the thread that binds it. Nietzsche laughs, a sound both mocking and liberating. Order? Hierarchy? And what comes next? Plato, your philosopher king and his puppet utopia. There's no supreme good floating in a metaphysical sky. The true world has become a fable, as I wrote, and you were its first architect. You crafted a higher realm to scorn this one. A morality is nothing but the will to power dressed as dogma. His words are a thunderclap, shaking the foundations of Plato's idealism. For Nietzsche, the values Plato cherishes are chains forged by the weak to bind the strong, a morality of slaves born from resentment. The superhuman, he declares, rises above such fetters, shattering inherited truth to forge a new dawn. Plato's gaze hardens, undeterred. If morality is merely a mask for the will to power, how do you explain the universality of certain virtues? Temperance, justice, courage. All peoples have honored these in some form. If they were arbitrary impositions, why do they endure? His question strikes at the heart of Nietzsche's rebellion, seeking the root of consistency in a world the German philosopher deems fluid. To Plato, these virtues are not accidents, but echoes of the eternal, signposts on the soul's journey to freedom through reason. Because men have been slaves to their own fear, Nietzsche fires back, his voice rising. The morality of slaves springs from resentment, as I traced in on the genealogy of morality. It's the weak clashing out against the strong, a pretext to tame the untamable spirit. And who better than you, Plato, to cloak that domestication in philosophical finery? He sees Plato's virtues as a gilded cage, a system designed to suppress the vitality of life. The superhuman, in Nietzsche's eyes, is not a servant of reason but a creator of values, a force that breaks the mold of tradition to shape the world anew. Plato's response is measured, almost paternal. You call slaves those who seek virtue, but I see in them the truly free. A soul ruled by passion and whim is a ship without a rudder. Only through reason can one aspire to genuine liberty. His philosophy is a call to mastery not of others, but of oneself. To Plato, freedom is not the absence of restraint, but the presence of order, a harmony achieved when the soul's paths align under the guidance of wisdom. Reason? Nietzsche scoffs, his tone dripping with disdain. That paper goddess adored by the timid. The truly free and doesn't kneel to imposed reason, he crafts his own morality. The superhuman doesn't bow to inherited values, he shatters them, transforms them, forges them with his own will. His vision is one of radical autonomy, where each individual becomes a star in a constellation of their own making. For Nietzsche, the chains of tradition are an affront to life's raw energy, and the superhuman is the one who dares to burn them away. And on what will this morality rest, Nietzsche? Plato counters, his voice steady but piercing. Individual caprice? If every man crafts his own code, there will be no justice, only chaos. The state itself would crumble. I wrote that where desire and pleasure rule, the city becomes lawless and anarchic. Without a higher ideal, humanity will sink into barbarism. His warning is dire, rooted in a belief that civilization demands a shared compass, a light to guide it through the storm of human nature. Barbarism, Nietzsche exclaims, his eyes alight with defiance. What a convenient word for those who fear life. You'd rather have an obedient flock than truly free men. History isn't shaped by slaves to virtue, but by those who rupture established morality. Man is a rope stretched between beast and superhuman. I wrote, and you, Plato, with your dread of disorder, would sever that rope before we can cross. His philosophy is a hymn to the creators, the breakers of norms who propel humanity forward, not through compliance but through audacity. Your superhuman is a tyrant in philosopher's robes. Plato retorts, his tone firm. You say history is made by those who defy morality. But what happens when power falls to those who seek only their own gain? Will they not become tyrants, raising all in their path? Justice is the balance of soul and city. Without it, there is only ruin. His argument is a plea for stability, a vision where power serves the good rather than devouring it. Tyrant? Nietzsche replies, and haunted. Isn't it tyranny to force a universal morality on all men? Values don't exist in themselves. Plato, they're born of will. There are no moral facts, only moral interpretations. I wrote. You cling to the worst of them, the notion that there's one right way to live. But tell me, what has your morality given men except centuries of guilt and repression? His challenge is a gauntlet thrown at Plato's feet, daring him to justify the weight of his ideals. It has given them order, purpose, direction. Plato answers, his voice resolute. Without principles, man becomes a beast driven by base desires. When that happens, Nietzsche, the city falls, and with it, humanity. His conviction is unshakable. The belief that morality is the scaffold of civilization, the guardrail against collapse. And yet, Nietzsche counters, the greatest men weren't slaves to morality but to their own power. Alexander, Napoleon, Caesar, they didn't ask if their deeds were just by some eternal standard. They acted. They created their own paths. The superhuman is the meaning of the earth. I wrote, but you'd keep men chained to your metaphysical fantasies. His examples are titans of history, men who bent the world to their will, not to a higher law. Alexander, Napoleon, Caesar, Plato echoes, his tone grave. Was it your model? Men who raised nations, who lived and died by war and boundless ambition. If these are your superhumans, Nietzsche, you've grasped nothing of the harmony that must govern a just city. A man's measure lies not in his power, but in his self-mastery. His critique is a lament for a world where might supplants right, where the soul's balance is lost to chaos. Chaos, Nietzsche cries, his voice a torrent of passion. How you tremble in a world without chains. But tell me, what's more chaotic than the lie of objective morality? You've tamed man, turned him into a docile beast content to watch shadows on a cave wall. I say we must be ready to set fire to ancient opinions, and yours, Plato, is the oldest and stale street of all. His words are a call to revolution, a torch raised against the edifice of tradition. What you call fire is the destruction of all that's noble, Plato replies, unflinching. Without a higher order, men will be trapped in their basest passions. I founded the academy because I believed education was the path to virtue. What do you offer? Letting each man decide good and evil by his own judgment. That's the recipe for the tyranny of the strong. His vision is one of cultivation, a world where reason lifts humanity above its instincts. Ironic, isn't it? Nietzsche shoots back. You, who preach education, were the first to censor poetry and art in your republic. The morality you defend isn't a path to freedom, it's a corset that strangles the spirit. You say the good is supreme, but I say God is dead, and with him all eternal truths. There's no destiny but what each man forges. When men shed the sacred, when they're free of morality's yoke, only their darkest impulses will remain. What then? His question hangs in the air, a challenge to Plato's faith in order. The world without justice is a world doomed to suffering, Plato responds, his voice heavy with history's lessons. I say this not from dogma, Nietzsche, but because time has proven it again and again. When all sense of the sacred is lost, when only impulse reigns, civilization crumbles. Warning is a mirror held to humanity's past, reflecting the ruins of cities that forgot their moorings. History is the graveyard of the weak, Nietzsche declares, unrelenting. Do you know what has driven progress? Not clinging to old values, but those who shatter them. Morality is the herd instinct in the individual, I wrote. I don't want a herd, I want individuals bold enough to carve their own paths. His philosophy is a clarion call to the exceptional, a rejection of the mediocre mass. Your contempt for morality leads only to the soul's corruption, Plato counters. Not all men can forge their own path without sinking into depravity. The state without justice is a battlefield where brute force reigns. But of course, Nietzsche, you prefer instinct's rule to reason's harmony. His words are a defense of the collective good, a plea for a world where power bows to wisdom. Reason, Nietzsche laughs, his tone sharp as a blade. That overrated word, the weak's excuse to deny the will to power. You've lingered too long in your world of ideas, Plato, blind to the real man of flesh and bone, who is more instinct than reflection. The higher man rises, the smaller he seems to those who cannot fly, I wrote. You crawl in your cave, fearing the light. His imagery is vivid, the soaring defiance of Plato's grounded ideals. You speak of flight, but I see only descent, Plato replies, his voice calm yet firm. You say man must destroy inherited values, but without them, what remains? An individual without virtue isn't a superhuman. Nietzsche, he's a tyrant of himself, consumed by his own desires. Power, without morality, is the greatest corruption. His argument is a quiet thunder, a call to anchor freedom in something greater than will. And morality without power is the greatest weakness, Nietzsche retorts. What you call virtue, I call blind obedience. Hope is the worst of evils, for it prolongs man's torment, I wrote. Your philosophy has filled humanity with false hopes. There's no cosmic justice, no absolute good, only will. Those who impose it shape the future. His vision is stark, a world where strength, not sanctity, defines destiny. Then your future is an endless struggle, where the strong crush the weak, Plato says, his tone somber. Is that what you desire, a world without ethics, where each man forces his will on another? There's no civilization without limits, Nietzsche. A man without measure is a barbarian, and a world of barbarians builds nothing, it only destroys. His words are a lament for a humanity unmoored, adrift in a sea of ego. Those you call barbarians have pushed history forward, Nietzsche insists. The Greeks you revere conquered with swords, not dialecticals. Truly free men don't bow to moral fictions. I'd take the chaos of creators over the order of the tamed any day. His defiance is a hymn to the untamed, a rejection of Plato's polished harmony. You're a slave to your own rebellion, Plato replies, his voice steady. Chaos isn't freedom, it's damnation. Without moral guidance, man becomes his own worst enemy. You'd rather destroy than build. But tell me, when all that's sacred falls, what remains? His question is a challenge, a demand for Nietzsche to face the void he courts. What remains, Nietzsche answers, his voice rising with fervor, is the man who dares to write his own fate, not the slave clinging to shadows, but the creator who defies the world with his will. He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow, I wrote. The superhuman needs no ancient philosopher to dictate justice. He is his own judge, his own lawgiver. His words are a manifesto, a call to rise above the ashes of tradition. When all are their own judges, Plato counters, there'll be no justice, only domination and oppression. You've sought to slay God and morality, but you've flung open the gates to spiritual anarchy. A city cannot stand on clashing wills. The good doesn't die because you proclaim it dead. His defense is a fortress, unyielding against Nietzsche's storm. I needn't proclaim its death, Nietzsche replies, his tone resolute. I need only look to history, where free men have shown time and again, they don't need your eternal truths. You await an ideal world. I'd rather create my own. His final thrust is a declaration of independence, a refusal to kneel before any altar but his own. Rebuttal pauses, to visions locked in eternal tension. Plato, the builder of moral order, believes in an absolute good to steer humanity's course. Nietzsche, the breaker of idols, sees morality as a human construct, a shackle to be cast off for the superhuman to emerge. Their clash is more than a debate, it's a mirror to our own souls, reflecting the timeless struggle between stability and liberation, reason and will. In this clash of titans, we've witnessed a profound reckoning. Plato offers us a world of harmony, where justice and virtue anchor the soul and the city in an eternal good. Nietzsche counters with a vision of radical freedom, where the superhuman transcends moralities, chains to craft a destiny unbound. The true freedom, we've brought these ideas to life not to crown a victor, but to ignite your own reflections. Which path resonates with you, the order of Plato or the will of Nietzsche? The value lies not in choosing sides, but in wrestling with the questions they raise about our existence. What do you think? Does true freedom lie in embracing a higher ideal or in forging your own? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this video with those who crave wisdom, and subscribe to True Freedom for more philosophical battles that stir the mind and soul. Next time, we'll dive deeper with insights from our guests, Liam and Sophia, who'll join us right after this to unpack these ideas further. Their discussion promises to shed new light on this eternal struggle. Don't miss it. Until then, let these voices echo within you, urging you toward your own truth.
Buckle up, everyone, because today we're diving headfirst into a philosophical showdown for the ages. It's Plato versus Nietzsche.
The ultimate clash of ideologies.
Yeah, look at it.
Order and absolute truth going up against individual will and self-creation.
And we're talking about two titans of thought, two thinkers who wrestled with some of the biggest questions humanity has ever faced, and whose ideas still resonate today, maybe even more so now.
What's really fascinating is how both of these guys really grappled with the core concept of freedom. For Plato, it was all about aligning yourself with like a higher order,
Right.
a universal good.
Okay.
But for Nietzsche, he was all about forging your own path, even if it meant like totally rejecting traditional morality.
So let's start with Plato. He was all about logic and reason.
Absolutely.
And he believed in this idea of forms, which are almost like perfect blueprints for concepts like justice and beauty. But the most important one for our deep dive today is the form of the good.
Right.
I mean, it sounds kind of like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? Like, are we all just trying to tune into this universal signal of goodness?
That's a really interesting way to think about it. And for Plato, these forms, they weren't just like abstract concepts.
Yeah.
He believed they were the very foundation of reality.
Whoa.
Everything we see and experience in the physical world. Just a shadow of these perfect forms. And the good, that was the highest form, like the sun that all the other forms revolved around.
Okay, so if I'm getting this right, Plato thought that true freedom came from understanding and aligning ourselves with this ultimate good. And how do we do that?
Through reason and philosophy.
Right. It's like he wanted us all to become philosopher kings, right?
Yeah. He actually envisioned a society where philosopher kings, those who could perceive the forms most clearly, would guide everyone else towards the good.
Okay.
He saw it as like the ideal way to create a truly just and harmonious society.
All right, now let's bring in Nietzsche. He comes along centuries later, and he basically flips the script on everything Plato stood for. It's kind of like he threw a philosophical grenade into Plato's carefully ordered world and just shouted, "God is dead."
It was a radical shift in perspective for sure. And when Nietzsche declared that God is dead, he wasn't just talking about a literal deity.
Right.
He was rejecting the whole idea of any pre-existing truths or values,
Okay.
including those eternal forms that Plato held so dear.
So instead of some like universal good dictating our actions, Nietzsche believed morality was something humans created.
Yeah.
And not always for good reasons. Right?
Exactly. He argued that traditional morality, especially Christian morality, was just a tool used by the weak to control the strong. He saw it as a way to suppress those who are naturally more powerful and ambitious.
Okay, I see where this is going. So instead of conforming to some higher order, Nietzsche thought true freedom came from recognizing that there is no preset path.
Right.
You have to create your own values, your own meaning.
He called this embracing the will to power.
Yeah.
This like inherent drive in all of us to grow, to overcome, to strive for something beyond ourselves.
Yeah.
And he believed that those who could truly embrace this will to power could become supermen.
Okay.
Individuals who transcended conventional morality and created their own values.
So it sounds like we have two completely different paths to maybe the same destination, or maybe completely different destinations, right?
Well,
On the one hand, we've got Plato with his vision of this structured, harmonious society guided by reason and a universal good. And on the other hand, we have Nietzsche urging us to break free from all those constraints, embrace our instincts, even if it leads to conflict and chaos.
it's like they're offering us two completely different paths to maybe even the same destination.
Yeah.
Which is human fulfillment. Or, yeah, maybe even two completely different destinations.
I guess that's the question we're really grappling with here, right?
Yeah.
Where does true freedom really lie? Is it in conforming to this higher order, as Plato suggests? Or is it embracing our will to power and forging our own path, like Nietzsche was advocating for? It's a question with no easy answers, but I think it's definitely a question worth asking.
Absolutely. And to really explore this further, I think we should dive into some specific examples of how these two giants clashed on their ideas about society, morality, and what it truly means to live a good life.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's see how these philosophical titans go head to head. Okay, so let's unpack some of these clashing viewpoints, right? We've got Plato, the architect of a society ruled by philosopher kings.
Yeah.
Those enlightened souls who grasp the forms and can guide us towards the good. It does sound a little bit like an intellectual elite calling all the shots, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does kind of raise questions about who gets to decide what the good actually is, right? But Plato believed that not everyone had the capacity for that kind of deep philosophical insight. He thought most people were driven by their passions and appetites.
Right.
And that they needed guidance from those who could see beyond those immediate desires.
But I can already hear Nietzsche scoffing at that idea.
Oh, yeah.
He'd probably say something like, let those passions loose, embrace the chaos. That's where the real energy is, you know?
Yeah, you're totally right. Nietzsche was really skeptical of any system that tried to impose order or control on individuals.
Okay.
Even those philosopher kings. He'd argue they're ultimately driven by that same will to power as everyone else.
Right.
They're just better at disguising it.
So if Plato was all about a structured society led by, like you said, the wise few, what did Nietzsche's ideal society actually look like? Was it just everyone for themselves, like a total free-for-all of conflicting wills?
For Nietzsche, the ideal society wasn't really about eliminating conflict,
Okay.
but about creating an environment where individuals could express their will to power, even if it meant clashing with other people. He saw conflict and struggle as essential for growth and progress.
Okay.
Trying to suppress those natural instincts, he argued, would just lead to resentment and totally stifle the human spirit.
It does sound a little bit like a recipe for chaos, though, right?
Yeah.
Can a society really thrive without some shared sense of morality, some agreed-upon rules of the game? That's what Plato was so afraid of, right? That without some kind of shared compass, we'd all just descend into anarchy and ultimately tyranny.
That's right. He did believe that, a shared understanding of the good was essential for a just and harmonious society. Remember, Plato saw justice as this delicate balance, both within the individual soul and within the state itself.
But Nietzsche might counter that by saying, forcing a single morality on everyone is just another form of tyranny, right? It stifles creativity and individual expression.
Exactly. Nietzsche saw traditional morality as a way of just keeping the masses in check, preventing the emergence of truly free and powerful individuals. He thought it was those who dared to challenge those norms, to step outside the boundaries, that actually pushed humanity forward.
So on the societal level, we've got this fundamental clash between Plato's vision of order and Nietzsche's embrace of individual freedom. Let's zoom in a little bit. I'm curious about how their ideas about virtue played out. You know, those classic qualities like courage, justice, temperance. Did they even agree on what those words meant?
That's where things get really fascinating. Remember, Plato saw those virtues as reflections of those eternal forms. Justice, for him, wasn't just a human concept. It was an aspect of the good itself, something unchanging and absolute.
So for Plato, developing those virtues wasn't just about following rules. It was about, aligning yourself with a higher truth, right? Those virtues were signposts pointing us towards the good.
Yes, and he believed that cultivating those virtues led to a harmonious soul, which in turn contributed to a harmonious society.
Okay.
He saw a very clear connection between individual morality and the well-being of the state.
But knowing Nietzsche, I'm guessing he saw those virtues as something else entirely, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
For Nietzsche, those traditional virtues, humility, self-denial, obedience, those were often just tools of the weak used to control the strong. He'd argue that they were born out of resentment and fear, not genuine strength.
So he's basically saying those virtues are actually chains holding back those truly powerful individuals, those who are driven by that will to power.
Exactly. He argued that those who embraced the will to power wouldn't be bound by those conventional notions of good and evil.
Okay.
They would create their own values, guided by their own internal compass, not by some rules imposed from the outside.
That is fascinating, how their totally opposite philosophies led them to such different conclusions about something as, fundamental as virtue.
Yeah.
I'm also curious about their views on fear and chaos. Two things that seem to be at the heart of this whole debate.
Yeah.
Plato, I'm guessing, saw them as threats to societal stability.
Right.
Almost like a parent worried about their kids going wild in a candy store.
That's a great way to put it. For Plato, structure and order were essential for preventing our base desires from taking over and causing harm. Remember his allegory of the cave?
Oh, yeah.
He used that story to illustrate how most people are just trapped in a world of shadows, mistaking appearances for reality.
Right.
Only those who escape the cave and see the forms for what they truly are can guide others towards the light.
And of course, Nietzsche fully embraces that chaos.
Oh, yeah.
He sees it as a source of creativity and growth.
Exactly. Nietzsche saw fear and conformity as enemies of the human spirit. He believed that real growth came from embracing uncertainty, challenging established norms, and pushing beyond those boundaries.
There's that famous Nietzsche quote, "The higher man rises, the smaller he seems to those who cannot fly." Like, if people think you're crazy, you're probably on the right track.
He celebrated those individuals who dared to be different.
Yeah.
Those who weren't afraid to shake things up and really challenge the status quo.
Yeah.
He called them creators, those individuals who forged their own paths and refused to be bound by tradition or convention.
You know, it's striking how both Plato and Nietzsche, despite their totally different approaches, were ultimately concerned with the same thing.
What's that?
Human flourishing.
You're absolutely right. They may have disagreed on the means,
Yeah.
but they both believed that there was a way for humans to live truly meaningful and fulfilling lives.
Like they're offering us two totally different maps to the same destination.
Maybe.
Or, maybe two different destinations altogether.
Possibly.
But the journey is what matters, right?
Yeah.
Grappling with these really big questions.
Yeah.
Trying to understand ourselves and the world around us.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to that really fundamental question we started with. Where does true freedom lie?
Right.
Is it in following Plato's path of reason and virtue?
Right.
Or in embracing Nietzsche's call to forge your own path, even if it means defying convention?
And I think that's a question we all have to answer for ourselves. There's no right or wrong answer.
Nope.
But understanding these contrasting perspectives, I think, can really help us navigate the complexities of life and make choices that are true to who we are.
Absolutely. And in our final segment, we'll explore how these ideas can be applied to our own lives and the challenges we face in the 21st century.
Okay, so we've journeyed through the minds of Plato and Nietzsche, explored their contrasting views on freedom, morality, even the very structure of society. It's been quite a ride, to say the least. Where do we even land after all that? What does it all mean for us, right here, right now?
That's the question, isn't it? And I honestly think both Plato and Nietzsche would probably agree that there's no one right answer.
Yeah.
The value is really in the journey itself. Wrestling with these big questions,
right,
challenging our assumptions, and ultimately coming to our own conclusions about how we want to live.
It's like they've given us two totally different lenses to look at the world. Well, Plato's lens is all about order and reason, striving for that universal good.
Right.
But Nietzsche's lens highlights individual will, self-creation, even pushing beyond those boundaries. It's almost like two completely different operating systems for, the human experience.
And which operating system we choose, or how we kind of blend them,
yeah,
really shapes how we navigate our lives, our relationships, how we even interact with the world around us.
It makes you wonder, though, is there a way to find a balance between those two seemingly opposing forces?
Yeah.
Between that need for, some kind of societal order and that yearning for individual freedom.
Right. Those are tensions we're still grappling with today.
Oh, absolutely. And maybe the key isn't necessarily choosing one philosopher over the other, but recognizing the wisdom that both of them offer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not being like a strict Platonist.
Right.
Or a diehard Nietzschean.
Right.
But finding a way to actually integrate their insights into our own lives.
Right.
Kind of like weaving a tapestry using, threads from both philosophies.
That's a great analogy. And I think that's ultimately what both Plato and Nietzsche would want us to do. Think for ourselves, engage with these ideas, and really carve out our own meaning in the world.
They wouldn't want us to just blindly follow their doctrines, but to use their ideas as springboards for our own exploration.
It's interesting to think that both of them, despite their totally different approaches, were really responding to the challenges of their own times, right?
Yeah.
Plato, after seeing all the chaos of the Peloponnesian War, he was really craving order and stability.
Right.
Nietzsche, writing during a time of rapid industrialization and societal upheaval, he saw creativity being stifled and really championed the individual will.
Yeah, it makes you think about all the challenges that we're facing today. Climate change, political polarization, the rise of AI.
Right.
It really does feel like we're at another crossroads.
Yeah.
What philosophical tools do we even need to navigate this new landscape.
Maybe by understanding these, contrasting perspectives, Plato's emphasis on reason and a shared good, Nietzsche's call for individual strength and self-creation, maybe that gives us a much broader framework for understanding ourselves and the choices that we face.
I think so, yeah. And maybe it can even help us find ways to bridge those divides.
Yeah.
To create a world where individual freedom and societal harmony can coexist. It's a tall order, but it's a challenge worthy of both Plato and Nietzsche.
And who knows, maybe out there somewhere, some future philosopher is listening to this very conversation.
Right.
Getting ready to pick up the mantle and offer their own unique perspective on all these eternal questions.
That's the beauty of it,
Yeah.
It never really ends. It's an ongoing dialogue, a constant evolution of ideas.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those conversations going. That's what keeps us all moving forward. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the minds of Plato and Nietzsche.